Hello, welcome back to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. I've been reading one chapter out of each book until I finish the book each time I present, and I have finished four books. This is my fifth book I'm on. Just before this one, I finished Love Endures All Things, describing a teenage marriage up until senior citizenhood, till death do us part. And the first of Love Endures All Things was the first 15 to 17 years Stephanie and I were married. And this one is the middle 15 to 17 years. The last one is Love Endures All Things, the Deep South. This is across the creek. And before that, I'd read a book called Imagination that had a story related to me and Stephanie getting married, and uh, and some stories that I just made up for fun. And then before that, I'd read Dad's Old Truck, Volume 1, Dad's Old Truck, Volume 2, to describe my youth and the years which I grew up in, what life was like. But anyway, so let's get started with Chapter 3 of Love Endures All Things Across the Creek. You remember the story we're working on? Stephanie and I had police run through our yards telling us to stay in the house. They were looking for a suspect and had their guns drawn, and it was really kind of frightening. So we decided to buy a place away from town. We found this place, and that's where this book picks up, talking about us doing that. We were going to get out of the city of Fort Smith, Arkansas. Things were really changing in cities at that time. So let's start off. The title of this chapter is A Barn Raising. And I know people don't think about things like that happening much nowadays, but they still do in certain situations. Of course, this was in the 80s, so it's a long time ago. Let's begin. When we bought the place, we were the only family that would live there for the next few years. There had been different families live on that side of the Little Lee's Creek in the past, but they never lasted. That did not deter us from our mission to own a house, even though we had to build it ourselves. We started by constructing a pole barn to store the building material. I called it a lean to in last chapter, but it was really a pole barn that we needed for the construction. The pole barn only took one weekend to complete. We started on a Saturday about 9 in the morning and cut logs for the frame of the barn using uh, post hole diggers. We planted the posts or the poles at each corner, and in the middle, uh, we had 8 poles planted and set in concrete by the end of the first day. We started early Sunday, and using a chainsaw, we cut the poles uh, to the proper height and framed the roof and attached the sheet iron. We framed 3 walls and supplied particle boards to keep the weather out. Nothing was ever uh, locked up that that was there, that was stored there, and nothing was ever stolen from us there. We used this sheet to store, we used this shed to store all of our building supplies until we moved to the place the next year. When we moved to the place, we borrowed Dad's gooseneck camper that slept 6. The camper had a bedroom that would be over the pickup bed, and the living room was next with a fold-away couch bed. The bathroom was alongside and 8-foot long hall, and the kitchen was next with the 6 foot devoted to it. The whole camper was 26 feet on the floor and 8 foot for the bedroom in the front. The camper was homemade and really looked homemade. When Dad took it to California on a trip, we all went, and the officer at the checkpoint in the California's checkpoint looked at the license plate, which read Oklahoma Camp Trailer, to which he responded, "So this is what an Oklahoma camper looks like." Dad didn't think it was funny, but the rest of us did. I had bought an electric generator to use power tools as I worked on the place, and that worked for the camper as well. As we started, we didn't have running water, so we used Dad's 5-gallon construction water can with a spout to dispense the water. I hauled 2 5-gallon cans of water home from work every day for drinking and cooking. We hauled 5-gallon buckets of creek water for other uses, and we generally needed 5 or 6 of them a day. Dad had developed or delivered the camper a couple of weeks earlier, and we had settled into it as we started the construction on the house. The oldest boy, still at home, Brian, wanted to live in the pole barn while it was still warm, and we agreed to relieve the crowding that was going on in the camper. He enclosed a small room, and there was where he lived with some privacy. We had a couple of dogs that were house dogs in town, but in the camper they were a problem that we would not recognize for several weeks. We were willing to suffer almost anything to get a house built. So, with both Stephanie and myself working full time in Fort Smith, we launched into the project with sheer willpower. We had to do 2 extra hours a day driving to and from work, living out there. Some of the work required 2 sets of hands, and we needed a great deal of brush work. So we agreed that Stephanie would stay at the place and I would work. In this way, we could get the house done much quicker. The cleaning took some time. Stephanie and our daughter Michelle did much of the underbrush cleaning and burning of brush. It wasn't long after that until Stephanie came down with something that made her very sick indeed. She had to be hospitalized for over a week. The doctors thought it was Lyme disease, but as it turned out, it was an allergic reaction to dog flea bites. She spent 5 days in the hospital isolated because they weren't sure what ailed her then. We were all very concerned about her, and that was the first time she had ever been hospitalized for anything besides having a baby. While Stephanie was in the hospital, the kids had to take up the slack left by her absence, and I'm proud to say they did that, a, a wonderful job of it. That was the most difficult week we'd ever spent. We had never been apart long before this. The dogs were soon moved out of the camper. Their comfort was not worth Stephanie's discomfort. Living out there, as we did, we began to learn how to deal with the creek. At first, we just took the back road. It was the easiest way. However, it did take so much more time to get in and out. Cold weather was not far away, and we needed to close in the portion of the house we had to start planned to at the start. We had a very cold ice storm come through while we were at work one day. We knew that the creek was too high to drive across. We knew we would have to use the back road to get home. As we started over the back way, we noticed that the ice was sticking quite well at this altitude. We had ascended about 700 foot in height when we came to the steep hill portion going down of the road that went into the valley where Paul Powers lived. Going up the other side was a set of stair steps that were about 5 inches tall and about 10 inches wide. They they were difficult on good days, but in this ice coated state, it was not going to be all that safe, as there was a very steep drop off on the left side of the road. As I prepared to drive up this hill, Stephanie sat next to me for comfort as we bounced and struck our heads on the top of the cab. Stephanie changed her mind and decided to walk up that hill and wait until I made it to the top. I did make it to the top of that hill, but the truck kept trying to slip to the left toward the steep bank. If it had come too close to the bank, it would have surely gone over and rolled many times. I'm not sure I could have survived such an event. Stephanie was the smart one to get out of the truck when I did this. The next day, the ice was much worse, and I didn't think I could have made the trip then. So it turned out best for us, as I did get us both home safely. Once we made it over the hill, it was all downhill for the most part to get back home where we were. We were off for 2 days due to the ice storm. We were so relieved to make it through the wild drive over the mountain that day. We slept like we were babies that night. We were so happy to be back home. Some of the difficulties when you go to the wilderness to start to live. God bless you. If you like what I'm doing, hit the like button. If you think your friends and families will enjoy them, send it to them or share it with them. If you're in a hurry to hear more of these stories, you can go to my webpage, which is curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, and it'll take you to Amazon from that site. The site will also tell you about every book that I've written. I put a little half a paragraph or so explaining what each book is. And you can order either ebook or paperback, which would be like this. And some of the books are being transformed into hardbacks in case you want to give them for gifts. And you could also go to my YouTube page, which is Curtis Jones Author page on Facebook. There we go. God bless you until I present another one, and I'll see you then.